$539,846, equal to the total revenues. Again, the health insurance premium from PIBA, continued fuel increases, CPI increases for contract services, medical and food at the detention center, salary adjustments at Public Works and the detention center, and several other variables. So on salaries, in addition to the COLA, the 3% COLA for everybody, this budget provides for a 3% salary adjustment in addition to that COLA for two departments. That's the detention center, which we know we're not maintaining competitive salaries there. We don't know how uncompetitive, but we know we're falling behind. And in Public Works, this would just solidify what you saw at the budget amendment, which was to provide them an adjustment in addition to the COLA. So those two departments are budgeted for those adjustments as well. So that makes up the highlights for the expenditure side. One of the things that I'm most pleased with is that this budget takes on no new debt in fiscal year 23. We're able to make some large capital purchases in public safety. And we can jump to the capital budget in a minute, but just for the moment, know that no new bond, no new debt is issued for fiscal year 23. And in fact, I have directed the early payment, the early defeasement of our oldest lease purchase bond, which we'll pay in this fiscal year with some existing funds that have been sitting in the bank, and that will yield a 1 mil decrease on debt service. So we'll go from 7.7 mils on debt service to 6.7 mils on debt service. For capital equipment purchases, yes.
Madam Chairman, if I may, I've got a
Go ahead.
question before you go to capital. Under those personnel requests, you have them listed 1 through 4. Is that the order of preference and importance that you're placing on those?
And that's, yes, sir, that's my opinion, that's in the order of priority and need to want. And I will just note, I don't know if I said this already, but there were 15 personnel requests, and there's listed there what is not in the recommended budget.
Which departments requested which items on there?
So for the number 1, 2, 3, and 4, or for the other?
All 4 of those.
Those 4, 1 and 2 and 3 came from administration, and 4 came from parks.
Okay.
And again, the 1 and 2, I feel affects the whole organization. Those will have a benefit to everybody, and I think number 3 too will have a benefit for many people. Capital equipment purchases. The department request for capital equipment total $4,247,000. The recommended budget includes a total of $838,858 in capital equipment purchases. The top priorities included our public safety equipment and public works purchases for generators, pickup truck, communication upgrade, mini excavator, a fire truck, a brush truck, and a remounted ambulance. Funding sources for capital equipment include ARP funds and fund balance.
What out of the ARP are we able to purchase?
So if you jump over to the capital equipment and capital improvement, one of the things we're doing here in this capital budget is sort of pulling out capital equipment purchases versus capital improvement projects. And my hope is, this hasn't been a focus this year, but my hope is for next budget season, we will create a capital equipment plan, a 3-year plan for capital equipment, and a 5-year plan for capital improvements for facilities. We just aren't able to get that done with everything else going on. But we want to work towards that for next year. And this year, to answer your question, Madam Chair, the ARP funds totals $725,000 as proposed.
I hadn't had time to look at
ma'am.
this.
And that's mostly focused, or if not entirely focused, on public safety purchases. For example, on page 2, the Emergency Preparedness Department, they requested 2 engines, but we've included the purchase of 1 fire engine, 1 brush truck, for a total of $500,000 of that $725,000. In addition to those, and there's an ambulance remount for the hospital EMS service, and so those 3 purchases amount to $725,000.
Christopher, what about the generators? Where are they?
So the
What
generators.
do we need to replace
Yeah.
generators or add generators?
Yes, sir. Let's see. The generators are on page 2. They requested, I think it's not on here, but I think it was 7 or 9 generators. They estimated $70,000 per generator. These are like for the whole building. So there's, the $140,000 number is for 2 generators for the 2 highest priority buildings. And that's recommended to come from fund balance.
And where will those generators be?
Indian Creek and with my rescue.
Another big item on page 2 as well is the 800 megahertz radio update. This is a $260-something thousand need that I think y'all have heard in the last year or two from the sheriff's office about this. This is the communications tower that connects all the radios, the way I understand it. And the radios that we're currently using are not going to be compatible with the upgrade. And so this is one installment of 3. The $87,444 is actually just 1/3 of what that cost is. But in talking to the sheriff's staff, implementing it over a 3-year period is doable. And so we need to make that first installment, because if we don't do it now, it will be obsolete by the 3rd year. So we need to go ahead and start making those payments and get that done. Or is it 2 years? We only have 2 years to do it? 25.
City's gonna have to do it too.
23, 24, 25. So we need to do it. We need to get this first payment in. If we can do 2 next year, we'll try, but we can't put it off any longer. And that's recommended to come out of fund balance too. The
And that
pickup,
number again is what?
262,
162?
262.
262.
that's the total. So for this year, it's 87,444, 1/3 of that.
262 what?
332.
So we kind of split up capital to, use operating funds for some capital purchases, fund balance for some capital purchases, and ARP for some capital purchases. And then on page 4 of the capital budget, the request was for $400,500. The recommended amount is $215,000. The total is $250,000 for all buildings for repairs and improvements. And this is the thing that hopefully next year, when we get to this point next year, we'll have an actual capital improvement plan for facilities, and it will show you the building, and it'll show you year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5. And then within there, within each year, each building's needed projects will be sort of mapped out over the next few years, so we can always be thinking about funding sources and those major improvements that need to happen. But for now, we just lumped them in. If you want to know, we can get you the list of projects, that 250, if you want to dive into that much detail. I can email it to you or provide you. But we had to cut a lot of the requested projects.
I got a question. It kind of goes back to our CPST. We removed the community hall roof replacement from the CPST because we said we could fund it outside of CPST
We did.
under our general operating and maintenance budget. And it looks like we included it or had a request for it here, and we don't have funding for it.
It's
year.
included. It's included. So top priorities for facilities include community hall roof, convenience center, attendant building, public safety buildings, maintenance, and other, but community hall is in there, $82,000 for the roof replacement.
It's in the narrative, but if you look at the spreadsheet you've given us on page 4,
Yes, sir.
it says that the amount
Oh, I
requested
see.
was 82,000,
Yes,
but
sir.
there's no amount approved by
I see which-
administration.
Yes, sir, we'll fix that. It is included in the 250.
It's 250, and the recommended admin is the same as.
Yeah. We just lumped it all together in that 215 number, so it's included in there, so we'll fix that. Thank you.
I have a question about the reserve fund balance. Right now, we're at 12,710,658. How much will that change by the time the end of June, do you think? Is this where we're pulling and paying all of our bills now?
So the short answer is it will probably go up, but I don't know how much. I think it's a little early to know.
Because all we'll have going in it mostly would be car taxes and,
Yes, ma'am. The good news is the boat taxes is up
yeah.
big time, so we under projected on collections, but not by a whole lot, but there'll be,
Mhm.
so what I say in here is anything over collected will be applied to this year's fund transfer.
Yeah,
or
it's
fund
about
balance
three hundred and
Correct.
70-something thousand.
transfer. Yes, ma'am.
But I
That's
didn't know
right.
how much this would be pulled down.
So 12,710 will probably go up by the end of the year, but we won't know till the audit is completed, hopefully in the fall or winter.
Well,
But we'll have a projections closer to June.
because I want to always keep that fund balance at 5 or 6 months.
Yes, ma'am, me too.
Because we start 6 months before we start getting money. And
That's right.
got to have your fund balance.
So while we're on that topic, 3 years ago, we had nearly 18 million in fund balance. It was actually less than that. It's about 14 million in unreserved, with a total of 18 million, including restricted fund balance funds. But the last 3 years has taken a hit on fund balance. So we're I don't think it's alarming. I don't think it's any cause for, too much stress, because I do think the 12 million will go up based on underspending and over-collecting to some degree. I mean, we budgeted 1.3 million for a transfer to balance the budget last year. The good news is that we're not going to need 1.3 million. How much of it, it's too early to know right now.
When we get our fee and lieu, does that go straight to the general fund?
All except for the bond payment. Everything except for the bond payment. The bond payment has to be subtracted out of the FILO revenues and earmarked for that bond payment. So the remainder in the current year's budget included something like $900,000 in operating funds. What the proposed budget does is take 325,000 of that 900,000, create the special Parks and Recreation Fund, so that if you look on the revenue sheet, there's a total transfer from FILO on page 1, line item 424 is 676,281. So that's the FILO fees going into the general fund. And there's a note there that says minus the bond payment, that's the 457.69, and minus the parks budget of 335,000. That leaves 676 for the general fund.
My problem with using philos to support anything that's reoccurring is something can happen with those philos. What if you had a big company that closed up and went bankrupt? Then our philos could stop, and you got all these reoccurring costs that's coming out of the philo.
So the hope is, that's a good point, and the hope is, well, number one, the portion is, there's still lots of philo, a little more than half, well, a little under half is still going into general fund, so that's good news. The concern about relying on it into the future, I share that concern. The vision is that Parks and Recreation can and should be substantially funded by fees for services. Not 100%, we're never going to get to 100%, but if we grow the program by seeding it with this philo money, in 5 years, in 6 years, they're generating X number of dollars, which will help offset any concern about losing philo money. I mean, the other good news is we're in pretty good shape, and a lot of the philo money is fairly new, and we have more philo money that's coming online over the next 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 years that we haven't even seen a dime of, and so there's more philo money that's coming. So I don't foresee any large or any complete exhaustion of philo fees. Like even if we lose a big company, we're only going to lose a fraction of our philo fees. So I wouldn't want to rely on a reoccurring program like this and exhaust philo fees. I'm in agreement there, but this is only a fraction of those philo fees. So if we lost a fraction of our philo fees in the future, we would have to make that adjustment. And that might mean that the program gets cut, or it might mean that we use more general operating revenue. Maybe we have to go back to ad valorem tax and make the payments to the municipalities like we have to do now. So, all kinds of things could happen if that did come to fruition.
Well, I would have to study over that a little bit, because I feel like we're going around the law to not make a payment. And I don't think that's really transparent. So I would have to study and think about that a little bit.
Yes, ma'am.
Anybody else we got a lot to look at here, and I know I don't think we want to go line item by line item tonight. I think we need to take it home and study it and come back with our questions, but that's up to y'all.
Well, I'm pretty it's way too much to digest in one night and a half. The one thing that I am very pleased to see in our budget is taking care of our current employees with 3% across the board
Absolutely.
increase, because that's of utmost importance to take care of those who have been taking care of us for some time. So I'm very appreciative of that. We are talking about doing a comprehensive salary study, am I correct?
Yes, sir.
When is that anticipated to be done?
We're putting the finishing touches on the RFP now. We're pretty close. I think I asked staff to have it ready and posted by the end of the week, is what I asked. So it should be posted, the RFP, and then it'll be up for 30 days. And then once they get started, the RFP includes a 6-month timeline. So they have to conclude their work within 6 months. So hopefully by the fall, definitely by the end of the calendar year, if we can get them started by July 1. But
Part of the reason why I'm asking that question, I'm not sure where we are coming up with the numbers for the positions that we're talking about hiring. I mean, are kind of random, or are they, I mean, I know that an IT person costs. I know that, a CFO type person is going to cost.
yes, sir.
But has that come through comparables with other counties around us? Has that come from compared it with the school district, compared it with the city, compared it with, where did those numbers, I guess, come from? Or would it make more sense to attach a number once the salary study is done? Which I know we gotta have something for budget, but
Yes, sir. They're not totally random. We did look at SCAC wage and salary report that they do every year to get the CFO and IT numbers. But admittedly, they're on the high end because we don't know, we want to budget for the high end. And then because if we get that perfect candidate, that Michael Jordan, then we want to be in a position to bring them on board. But to your point, I mean, it could be 20% less on each of those big salaries. On the grant writer, that came, we didn't have a lot of comparables. And so that just came from in my experience, 60,000 is something that a grant writer can expect to make as a salary. I used to be part of a Grant Writers Professional Association many years ago, and back then they were making in the 50s, but I think 60s is something reasonable. If you want somebody with experience, especially experience with federal grants, the 70,000 seems, in my judgment, would be enough to attract somebody with that kind of experience. If we're going to go to 50 or 60, would be concerned about having the high-level experience of federal grant writing. But at 70, I think we could attract that person.
well, I guess the other thing I was thinking on the grant writer is that most grants have a line item in there for administrative or whatever. I was thinking if we had a base salary and it would make them more hungry. If they got a percentage of what they bring into the county based on earnings, then it would be just to give a flat base salary. And, so really, if I got a flat base salary, and what gives me a whole lot of incentive to work hard to get a grant?
Well, the other thing to me, unless the grant writer has multiple responsibilities outside just specifically writing grants, then the grant writer needs to get more revenue than their salary, or we're losing money.
Absolutely.
Because we're paying for all their perks and benefits and all that. So, I'm sure you've thought about all the responsibilities that this person as well as these others would have. So they've got, especially a grant writer, they need to pay their own ticket plus.
And I'm not sure if a commission is appropriate. We'd have to think about
Study.
that, and I don't, but certainly the measure would be, what are you bringing in? They could be evaluated. Certainly there's metrics to evaluate them on their effectiveness that can be used even if it's a base salary, but we can think about that some more, but I'm concerned about whether that's appropriate for that position.
Well, I've mentioned several times, so I'm not trying to put you in a corner on a grant writer. I feel like the county needs a grant writer,
Yes, sir.
but I do want them to carry their own weight at least.
Yeah. An experienced woman shouldn't have a problem doing that, especially with all the money floating out there from the federal government.
Is this something you think we could advertise fairly quick too, and once the budget's,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if we stay on schedule, we'll have third reading at the end of May. We would be recruiting
Ready to hit-
in June.
hit.
Yes, yeah, and maybe even sooner. I mean, I don't like to go into third reading making any presumptions, but as soon as possible, we'd be recruiting.
I guess as part of, before I would support approving that position, I would like to have the job responsibilities. I'd like to have some list of potential grant monies that we aren't currently getting that we should be able to get if we had somebody full-time out there searching and seeking out these funds. On the other hand, that's, to me, a way to balance out what's our investment versus what is our potential return. If we're investing on a grant writer and we have no idea about what the potential return will be,
we might not get much.
that's not a very good investment.
Well, I've heard a lot of I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, I'm adding to a hopefully here. But I have talked with a good many of the rescue squad over the rescue squad, they have to write their own grants. The fire chiefs at the different departments have to write their own grants. We should be helping those people are volunteers. We need to have somebody supporting and knowing, and again, as Christopher said a while ago, there's so many grants out there flying around that we need to have a figurehead here so that all comes, so the town of Whitmire doesn't miss one, or the little small town of Pete doesn't miss one because they got absolutely nobody to be on the receiving end. It would be good to have, but again, it's got to stand on its own accord. And
I agree with you totally, but all those grants that those people are currently seeking and writing, that should be something they ought to be able to give us a list, and it ought to have a monetary value associated with it. So that, and it doesn't have to be down to the dollar, but it needs to be round figured enough that gives us a good idea of what kind of
Yeah, we don't-
expectation we would have from a grant writer.
And we don't get their grant financials, do we? We don't, yeah, we're not,
That's forms.
so we don't have an accounting of what they're getting or,
but the other, go ahead, I'm sorry.
We-
Maybe 20 and fire 10. I mean, we budget like 30,000 just for D last year.
for matches.
For matching.
For matching.
Yeah.
And normally that's roughly what, 10% or something like that generally?
Well, this one, I think the last one we paid was $5,000 and one was 47 today, so it's small.
It depends, yeah. It's-
But I also, unfortunately, with grant writing, sometimes you gotta make yourself look bad to get the grant. And those people aren't trained, a lot of times to write grants, to receive them. I think our percentage of getting one, if we get a good grant writer, would significantly enhance itself. But, you know, again, a lot of them have at least made attempts to write grants. Some of them get them, some of them don't. But anyway, I totally concur that we need to see roughly what it would potentially yield. Now, the one thing about something like that is we could put a person in place for 2 years, and if it's not yielding the results that we need, see ya, you know?
Another metric for the grant writer is if we need another finance person, because they're writing the grants, they're actually not the accounting person. So once it starts coming in, there's actually a back-end burden, and if it's a large grant, that's a pretty substantial burden. So we'll know if they're successful because of the piled up, accounting that has to happen on those large grants. And there's actually oftentimes an associated accounting person that is the counterpart to the grant writer. So if somebody's getting the money in, the other person's accounting for the expenditures and all the compliance rules for those grants. So that's going to be another metric to know if that person's being successful.
The FAA is really a stickler for what they require. and-
Well, yeah, we almost lost a big FAA.
There's a lot of work going into getting a grant. Lots of work.
Yes, CDBG is probably the worst.
What is that?
The
Okay, yeah, they are.
last one we had was with up in Whitmire.
Yeah, they give a lot of sewer and different things.
Sounds like it wouldn't be hard to justify it, we just need to see the justification.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll identify some potential grants and some numbers and put that into a job description or a summary of duties, as well as the other positions. We'll do something similar with those. I guess just to kind of summarize or in closing, just one of the, on fund balance, the county is carrying several lease purchase bonds that I'm still getting an education on, but essentially, the way I understand it, and if you know something different, please share it with me, but essentially, we issue a bond, and then that bond money goes to a bank. The bank uses that money to make a lease purchase payment, and that payment is for vehicles and equipment. And those payments are made in installments over a period of 5 years. The bond money sits with the bank. We don't have the money earning interest in an account. And then, if I understand the process, the bank also holds the collateral, which would be the title to the equipment. And we don't get that until the promissory note is paid in full, which takes 5 years to do. So my approach, my thought process on fund balance is that we have enough cash flow. Well, hopefully, in theory, we have enough cash flow that hopefully we can avoid that and not pay what right now we're carrying bonds to the tune of $192,000 in interest over the 5-year period. And I feel like there's enough cash flow that if we plan those purchases and we have a vision for the next 3 years, 4 years, then we can do something different so that we're not carrying that extra interest. Because not only are we paying interest on the bond, but we also have a promissory note with the bank, so there's sort of double interest that is being paid out. So hopefully with a little bit of planning and a little keeping our fund balance healthy, we can self-fund some of these purchases and avoid those payouts, which I think is being good stewards of taxpayer dollars. With that said, I do kind of take the approach, and maybe it's because I've lived through enough hurricanes to stress out about it, but I like to see 6 to 9 months in fund balance, mostly because of what you said, Mrs. Arrowwood, which is our cash flow kind of comes to a screeching halt towards the third quarter of the calendar year, but so we got to float that low cash flow time period. But also important is that 6 to 3 months of extra funds, we can self-finance capital purchases and avoid this extra interest that we pay out, because we build our fund balance by over collections and underspending, and we can keep doing that. There's no reason why we can't continue to build that up or pay ourselves back when we use fund balance for a capital purchase. So that's just kind of philosophically my approach going into it. I think we all share a conservative sort of
Very
approach
conservative.
to our savings account and appropriate uses for it. So if we don't have to borrow that money, that's saving money. We just have to be prudent about those capital purchases.
Well, occasionally we've used some for economic development when we get way ahead and still
Yes, ma'am.
kept our balance,
Yes,
a
ma'am.
good, healthy balance.
Yeah, that was part of the Samsung deal. We basically had to go into, Christopher, this is not avoiding you, but I just know the person that's been here longer than you have been alive. These bonds, et cetera, that we have right here, thank you for listing them. But can we get a little more detail by next meeting, such as when they are maturing or what? Is what? Okay, just put it all together in the budget summary too, because that's gonna reflect on when some of our meals are coming out. I know, and again, I guess the other thing I would like to see on some of these too is the interest rate that we got them at. Because I think you were saying something about, we had what, 500 and?
The $192,000 in interest that we're carrying right now, just on the lease purchase bonds.
Well, we have one that's interest only, and when it comes due, the whole note's
not-
gonna be,
And that's not even,
That's not it.
actually, it's the number one, it's the spec building one. So
The spec
it's
building.
listed here, but it's not included in the $192,000. That's just lease purchase bond interest. That's just 6, 7, 8, 9.
What I'm wanting to do
10 and
basically
11.
is show that the bonds that we have for just people, that might want to know, that those bonds some of them are at 2% and maybe even less, am I right?
3.23, 3.2, 3.2, and 1.32 is the 20.
Yeah, so basically what I'm saying is,
they low.
when you can borrow money at 3% or less, basically, that's pretty much free money.
All of these are.
And keep in mind, there's additional interest paid out on the promissory note for those lease purchases too. So it's a good deal. I agree. But $192,000, it adds up.
Yeah.
I would expect those to start going up, not ours, but new ones,
New ones.
because the rates are going
It
up.
might not be as favorable to use
Yeah,
bonds in the
Right, it would be,
Yeah.
you're making my case for me that if we have our healthy fund balance, we can do these needed purchases, kind of self-funding.
Mhm.
Mr. Livingston, would you like to know what was purchase with those bonds.
Be nice.
More information, the better. And again, I know it's a lot, and again, if it's gonna cost you a lot of time, I mean, just, if you can transfer it, that's fine. I don't want you,
It's all right here,
I don't want you spinning wheels having to get it done, but
It's all
Just got it.
I guess in conclusion, it's always good to address future risks, which we're not, we can't escape risks. I just kind of put in here that there's always things that we're not going to be able to predict or project, and who could have predicted a pandemic and the impact on finances. So, there's a lingering COVID-19. It's not, I think it's too early to say it's behind us. Hopefully, things will continue to go in the right direction. And hopefully, this time next year, we can truly say it's behind us. But something could happen, a new variant, a new cost that could really affect business. And so that's still a remaining risk. Obviously, the war in Europe and Ukraine could impact our finances here at home. Inflation continues to be going in the wrong direction. And then, of course, the Fed anticipates a series of interest rate hikes this year. So other major risk factors, especially with economic development, is, I think you all aware of this, workforce development and housing, two things that we really don't have a plan to address, but hopefully this year we can put a plan in place, and that'll give us some direction on how to use our resources and our staff time. But workforce development is, what does it mean, and how much is it going to cost, and what has to happen, and what is the county's role? Is it really something that we can afford to take the lead on? Is it really our responsibility to train and educate the workforce, or do we have partners in the community like Piedmont Tech that we can support, and hopefully they would take the lead and they would partner with the industries that need this kind of training for the workforce? So what is our role? That's something we're going to be talking about in the strategic planning for economic development. And similarly, housing, luckily the comprehensive plan has a housing element in it, and I think it will come up with some good information. I have formulated the opinion that we need the whole range of housing. We need moderate range housing for industry workers that can afford a modestly priced house, but we also need high-end housing that will help our tax base and attract, that demographic to the county as well. So I think we do need a range and diverse housing stock going into the future, and I would caution against focusing on just one type of housing because the need is great. So we need to address those. They're going to have an impact on our success next year. A third major risk factor is the evolution of fire and rescue services being all volunteer with the industry boom that we're experiencing and the growth of the city and the growth of the unincorporated. Despite the consensus numbers, we know the growth is happening to a greater degree than the census indicates. And where do we go from here with fire services, and how do we get there, and what does it look like, and how much is it going to cost? Those are things that are going to impact the budget going into future years. And if we don't do it, if we don't address it sufficiently, our ISO ratings will go down, insurance premiums will go up. I mean, not to mention the fact that people will die and they won't get the service that public safety and rescue provides. So it's something that's going to require some effort. We've included money in the budget for a study for fire services that will hopefully give us some ideas about that progression and what's the next step for Newberry County. And then I think I'm probably repeating myself, but fully funding staff levels to avoid attrition and to maintain a healthy and productive work environment is something that is important, and if we don't do it, it adversely impacts productivity and also customer service. So continuing to support staff in word and deed by making sure we have enough staffing levels to avoid burnout and to avoid too much turnover is something that I think not just the county, but many employers, are struggling with and is a risk for their future as well. On the other hand, if we have a strong workforce, we can continue the progressive character envisioned in the county's vision statement. And if we don't, then we fail to progress. We can't implement that vision if we're understaffed and in survival mode. And finally, there's so much positivity in Newberry County. I wanted to end on a optimistic note. We've got extraordinary success in industry with Rick's work with Samsung and some of the Samsung providers that will be coming on later this year. Approximately somewhere around 1,000 jobs over the next 6 to 18 months will be introduced into Newberry County, and that's between 2 projects under construction now and an expansion at Samsung as well. So that's pretty exciting. We also have really great partnerships with the hospital, with the city, with Piedmont Technical College, and so many others, and those partnerships are extremely valuable to the community. And we have a friendly community, which I think lives up to the city's motto, but I think the county likes to contribute to that reputation as much as we can. And so for all those reasons and more, there's lots of optimism about where we are, and I think there's some stability in the finances. It's just a matter of how much progress can we get done in the next fiscal year. So thank you for listening.
All right. Any other questions?
Thank you, Christopher. Thank you, Debbie. Yeah, and Karen and all your staff. I don't have any other questions. I'm sure we will. I will after I have a chance to go through
Study it.
the line items. But thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
The next time we visit this will be April 20th at a budget work session. We're going to reschedule to April 12th. I won't be available during that time, so we're going to do it at 4 o'clock on April 20th in advance of the regularly scheduled council meeting. So we'll have 2 hours scheduled. We have also reached out to the elected officials and invited them to make a public appearance about their budgets if they want to, just optional. We've invited them for the April 6th meeting, and if needed, we'll set aside a limited amount of time at that budget work session if they can't make it on April 6th. But we want to give them an opportunity to have some face time with council about their budgets. So hopefully we can squeeze that in as well. So April 20th. So if you have any questions or you want to meet individually, please reach out to me directly or to Debbie. Schedule a time. We will walk you through each line item and what is requested, what was not recommended. Anything you want to know, please come see us. We're always happy to see you. So come and hang out, and we'll go through. We'll spend. It usually takes about, I'd say, probably close to 2 hours to get through every line item. That's if you have no interruptions.
Okay, the next on the agenda is discussion of potential fee agreement for architectural space, needed analysis for the administration building.
So
Jump in.
I just wanted to bring this to your attention. There's no action required, but we engaged an architect firm, actually 3 of them, to talk to them about our space needs and the first step in trying to figure out, how can we improve our services, the delivery of our services. And this is focused on administration. So finance and HR and legal, the treasurer and auditor, building and zoning, all of those things that we interact. It doesn't include public works or animal shelter, but just trying to get all of the sort of office into a functioning single space for the citizens to come to and get all their services that they need. And so we have met We've given them sort of the vision of trying to bring these, basically these three buildings, the Ag Building and the Auditor Treasurer Building, Annex, and even parks and even economic development, trying to bring everybody into the same building. So that is what I would call a abbreviated space needs study. So we're not going to look at the whole organization, but we're going to focus on those areas. The cost of doing that is about $13,000. We probably could have gone ahead and done that, but I didn't think it was sufficient to just have the space needs analysis. What we need as a result of that is a conceptual floor planning, a conceptual, workflow for all the offices to see what that would look like and how that would improve services and interaction with the public. And so in order to get the drawings, it would include floor plans and like an elevation drawing, sort of a conceptual drawing. Those are architectural fees, and that's an additional $27,000. So the total for both services would be $40,000. And that's just one estimate, so we're waiting on two more estimates. Instead of just doing the space needs, I wanted to, because 40,000 is over my authority, I wanted to just come and let y'all know and council know that we're working on the three bids. We expect it to be more or less $40,000. And we've identified available funding to get that started. Well, we've identified the $13,000 from Irvin's budget to get that portion of it started. We have not identified the $27,000, but we think we can find it. And so that would be the first step, and if we have ARPA money available, that may be a wise way to spend it on a capital project like that, to avoid using tax dollars to build that. But the consequence of that would be, a new building, an efficient way of providing services, getting buildings back on the tax rolls, lower maintenance costs, energy efficiencies, not to mention the work productivity that would result from that as well. So lots of good reasons to at least consider that. And this would be just a preliminary step to get you more information about that project.
And not to mention the fact that our Chief Justice Toll, who's not currently Chief Justice, came here once and reminded us that we were here in this building at her leisure. And at any moment, we
They can
could be
push you out.
invited to vacate.
I had to vacate once, not from this building.
Yes, ma'am. And the court's expressed a need. They're growing. They have space needs like many of us. So just FYI for today.
Just FYI. Okay, that brings us to the public comments section. Matt DeWitt.
Thank you, members of council. I'm here to address two things this evening that were brought before you for consideration. And the first being the transfer fee increase to city businesses. As Chris highlighted for you, that's going to be about a $238,000 increase to city businesses on their tipping fees. And we've been very appreciative of the county partnership for all these years. And I'm not here to tell the county how to run their business. I think that's for you all to decide. I just want to give you some perspective from the city side of the street and what that means for city businesses. So that's going to affect 213 businesses that we currently serve within the city of Newberry. Those businesses will see, if we were to stay in the commercial garbage business, that would be an increase of about 119.76% that we would have to pass along to our city businesses. So to put it in perspective for you, an average per monthly container costs $86 for a business. We'd have to increase that to about $179 per month with the fees that would be passed along. That's an increase to a small business in the city of Newberry of about $1,117 per year per business. I think Chris highlighted for you inflation and various costs that businesses are now being affected by. A lot of them are barely getting by after COVID. Profits aren't what they were, and some of these businesses are struggling. I can't guarantee that a fee increase on garbage would put anybody out of business, but I know this much, and it's something that we experience every year when we talk to businesses about utility fee increases. Just a 1% utility fee increase, and our phone blows up about all the businesses that are going to close because of the fee increase that they'll experience through utility costs. Now, I can't sit here and tell you that this increase is going to do that to some businesses, but this is what I'm calling businesses about a 1% utility increase. This is a 119.76% increase over the service we were providing since I think the transfer station has been accepting commercial garbage. So what in essence this would do to the city is this would now make us the high-cost provider, and it doesn't make business sense for the city of Newberry to continue in the commercial garbage business. So we'd have to discontinue that. That, I think, is a lot for small businesses to be impacted by after what they've been through over the last 2 years with COVID. I think that if this was something that the county was wanting to pursue, it could look at ways as to not so drastically impact business all at once. Maybe there's a way to grow into this thing. Maybe there's a way to continue to partner to where we don't have to negatively impact city businesses. But again, if the county does decide to pursue this, the city will have to discontinue garbage service. We will have to contact our customers and explain to them why we're getting out of the garbage business and why they'll need to pursue what in essence will be more expensive service from private providers moving forward. So that's what I wanted you to hear me say today is there's a consideration, I think, for the revenue producers for the county. Most of the business that happens in Newberry County happens here in the city of Newberry. Those small business owners already took a lot of responsibility, and I think just as consideration, it's a major impact to have all this hit them in one fiscal year. The other thing I'll speak to is the recreation fees. I think Chris mentioned earlier, we've come up with an agreement a few years ago that the county pays the city a small amount to help with the putting on of recreational opportunities for the city residents, but also the county residents. What we've done over the last 3 years is, prior to 3 years ago, we had an out-of-city fee and then the city fee. So if you were a county resident and you came to the city, because you don't pay city taxes as a county resident, you're going to pay a little bit more to participate in our recreation programs. Well, with the formation of the agreement that we had, or that we still have now today, but talking about eliminating moving forward, we eliminated those extra fees for county residents. We also created a countywide recreation program that services everybody for basketball and baseball, which when I first got here I was told would never happen because no one would ever give up baseball, but we've done it. We've created a countywide baseball program. And I think that the competition that we've created within recreation is nothing but a benefit to the participants. Prior to, the county would maybe have, through the YMCA, have 4 basketball teams, and we would have 4 basketball teams. Now we have a league with 8 basketball teams. So you're not playing the same folks every week, and it provides a better experience for the overall user. We think that's worth the $40,000 that you all send us each year. We don't charge back anything to the county for facilities or all the staffing that it takes to put on those events. That's something we're going to have to consider moving forward if those fees were removed. We're happy with the fees the way they are right now. It allows us to provide basically countywide recreation, and I don't know what's broke with recreation. No one's complaining about recreation. I don't hear any county residents complaining about recreation. I don't see the need for the county to grow up to 14 people to run recreation when recreation is being run now at very little cost to the county, and we can continue to do that. But we just can't get that $40,000 fee removed, or it makes it harder for us to continue that. And we're going to have to look at going back to the fee structure we had before, where county residents pay more to come to the city and participate, which is not a benefit to the participants of the programs. Those are things from the business side of the street, from the resident side of the street, on both of those services that I just want you all to consider moving forward. I know that you all have to make financial decisions that affect the county, and I respect that. I just wanted to ask for your consideration on recreation and the city tipping fees for city businesses. If there's any questions for me to the city that I can help answer from you all, I'd be happy to do that.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions for Matt? Thank you, Matt.
Yep, thank you. Appreciate y'all's time.
Next, Joe Trainer.
Thank you, Ms. Councilperson. Just a quick couple notes along with what Matt was saying. With the millage increase and the trash pickup in the city, and we're trying to attract new businesses to the city, small businesses, dimes and dollars make a difference. I think it could have a negative effect against attracting businesses to buildings downtown. So how they've been able to do it since 1994 or so without increase, I don't know how that's changed, but something in the budget must be changing. So, but I think that that's something that could negatively affect, and then also the fact that we like the service we're getting now. It's, I can pick up the phone if I ever had a problem, but I very rarely have a problem with the service I'm getting now. Now I'm gonna have to go out and find a new provider for those services, and whether the quality is gonna be as good as we got from the city or not, I don't know. So just something to consider that, when we make this change, that it's going to negatively affect some people. And I know this basically equates to a tax increase for some folks. So between the millage going up a little bit and then between the additional fees, it can make a difference. So just wanted y'all to consider that and appreciate your time.
Anybody got any questions? Okay, if that's all, Les, you got anything you want to say?
Just to, again, thank you to the staff. Y'all have, once again, put a lot of time in and produced a lot of work with a small staff. And thank you, and also thanks to Matt and Joe for coming out, and for the others here, the sheriff, others here tonight. Thank you for being here.
And I thank y'all too, and I really especially thank you for this worksheet. That's nice to have. We can study it a little bit and see if we got any questions and kind of know where all the money's going. Anything?
I'm good. Thank y'all. Thanks, everybody, for what they did. Thanks for the feedback.
Do I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Need a second?
Second, I'm sorry.
All in favor? Raise your hand.
What time is it?